right? So most club players should just learn a really good stock shot with proper mechanics mid-flight and use at least 3 or 4 clubs to chip with. I always say if you get decent at your stock shot, you'll occasionally be handcuffed where it's a place you can't play. Maybe you're off a huge downslope, and you need the super flop or something. But the reality is you can finesse your way, wedge your way well enough to be a 2 handicap. And every 18 handicap out there be, I'd love to chip like a 2. Well, crap. Well, you don't have to do anything special to be that. Now, if you want to play for a living, you got to be able to do the other. So I always start, like when I was coaching, I coach Stuart Sink right now. So we go like, okay, we're going to get our 2 alignment sticks out. We're going to check your mechanics. We're going to start with our block practice. You're going to hit 3 good shots with each of these 3 clubs. All right, now we're going to start playing around. Now we'll hit the low one. Now we'll hit the super flop. Now we're going on the downslope. Now we're going to hit one out of the weeds. Now we're going to tee one up. Now so you need both if you're going to be elite. But if you're going to be a 2 handicap, you don't. You just need to be good at the stock shot. 90% of the time, you're fine just changing clubs, hitting a stock shot.
All right. Here live with arguably one of the, if not the best short game coach in the world right now, and has been for quite some time, James Sieckmann. James, thank you for carving out some time out of your busy schedule to make room for our small podcast.
No, happy to be on.
One of the simple question I'd like to ask very high performers that have come on the show, been lucky enough to have a number of them, maybe you have given this some thought, maybe you haven't, but what is it, at least in your own mind, that makes you so good at what you do?
Oh, that's really interesting question.
I didn't mean to drop a bomb on you right from the beginning.
No. I mean, listen, I don't know if I can answer. I mean, a lot of people care passionately about what they're trying to do. A lot of people are trying to learn and get better every day. These are things that I've constantly been doing. But I would say my joy or my passion is for high performance. So I've always thought, what can I do if you're my client to help you be a high performer? And a lot of times it's not a simple answer. Maybe it's not how you fold your right arm when you chip, which needs to be improved. It could also be, how do you reduce anxiety when you play? How you train effectively? So I'm look at the whole thing, emotions, and most problems with people are people problems. They're not always mechanical. So I think my broad view of how to help someone would be the thing that sets me apart compared to most other coaches.
I would say so, just from following your information, following you for quite some time, knowing who you were. And it aligns, I think, and where the idea for that question came up is aligns with most people if they have a beacon of what they do and it guides their decision making, whether they realize it or not. And I always use Apple as the clear example because it's so easy for most people to understand. And that Jobs wanted to change the world. He wanted to be rebellious. He wanted to do all these things. And that was kind of what drove them in their decision making. It was what they followed, or that the founder put forth, and then everyone that worked for him followed. And I had always said, if you're stuck between decisions on what to do, you will tend to have if you understand what that beacon is, you'll have tend to follow that in your decision making. It will make tough decisions easier because that's what you gravitate to. And I think a lot of people don't have that. And the fact that you had wanted to teach high performers or have a passion for high performance, and then you look at your body of work and who you've taught, it aligns ideally.
Yeah, I do. I'll tell you, in my head, the details matter, and the details of everything. I don't know how you slept last night. I don't know if you're hydrated and you have all these issues you want me to help you with. I need information and details. I'll tell you one interesting story. I tell this story a lot, but when I was first starting, I quit playing and I said, you know what, I'm going to teach. So I was a pretty good player, but that doesn't mean you can teach worth a damn, right? So I thought, what am I going to do here? I'm going to go find the number one teacher on the planet and I'm going to watch him teach. So I reached out to David Ledbetter and I said, hey, David, I'd like to come down and watch you teach for a day. So I did that. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any clients. I was just like, okay. So I went to Lake Nona, and he was number one teacher in the planet. He was teaching, Faldo and Norman and all these David Frost, all these elite players. And I showed up at 7:30. The first lesson was at 8. He comes out, greets me. His 8 o'clock lesson was Bob Lohr, who's a PGA Tour player. He says, "Okay, Bob, you warm up here. The lesson will be on the tee deck over there. James, you wait here at 8 o'clock. I'll meet over there." So I'm just like, okay. So I'm just standing there watching, waiting for my time to watch, I guess. And about 10 minutes to 8, I see David Ledbetter walk over to the tee deck and start picking up all the broken tees off the teeing ground. And it was like a bomb went off in my head. I'm like, okay, so now I know what the number one coach in the world does. He picks up the broken tees because he wants it perfect when the guy comes walking over there. And that changed everything about how I thought. Now I'm looking at it from like the student's perspective. When they work with me, what's their going to be the perception of the session, the details? And so I always ask this to young people because I get a lot of young coaches come to me and say, "I want to do what you do. Can you help me?" I'm like, okay, you got to figure out what your broken tees are, basically. You have them in your podcast, in your business. You have things you stand for, the details that you're not going to compromise on. And for David Ledbetter, it was going to be a clean tee deck when he walked over there.
That's pretty
And
cool.
so, yeah. And so that's a guiding principle for me, is like, I have a lot of broken tees in my business and I'm not compromising on them. They call them culture or however you want to label it. But, yeah, I would say that's kind of a guiding beacon. I have these cultural statements, these cultural beliefs that I'm not compromising on.
And their success shows clues. And Ian Fraser, I don't know if you're familiar with Ian. He's up in Toronto. He's a club fitter, very, very well known, very good at what he does. He was on the other day, and I asked him that question. And one thing that he said was, once somebody does a fitting, that they have him in their camp more so than just once they swipe the credit card. He's there to help them if there's issues after, or how does their swing change, or does their coach change their setup, and all these different things. And that's his thing. He is totally committed to making whoever is in front of him play the best golf they actually can with the clubs that they have. That's what he considers his job. So more than just the X's and O's, it goes a lot further than
It
just those
does. And
things.
someone's going to trust you with something that's very important to them, which typically people that are willing to work and spend money. Golf's important to them. It's a small piece of, maybe not meaningful to very many people. To that person, it's super important. And that's exactly right. It's like, okay, now I'm on your team. And you might have other people on your team too. But like once I'm on the team, I'm not off. So,
Mm-hmm.
you're right. It's a long-term commitment if you do it correctly.
Over the course of your career, and you've been doing this a long time and doing it very well, technology is in our life. It has made a very big impact. And obviously in the coaching world, it has made a big impact as well. How have you seen, or how has you seen the philosophies evolve over the years with the advent of tech, in particular in the short game?
Yeah, well, you can't. So when I came up with what I was going to teach, I watched what David did, but I still didn't know what I was going to teach. So what I did was I just basically studied the best players in the world. I'm like, okay, I'm going to study Seve. I'm going to study Raymond Floyd. I'm going to study Corey Pavin. These guys are unbelievable wedge players. I'm going to figure out what they're doing. Same with the putting. So back in the day, I'm like, no, you don't keep your head still. You don't lean left. You don't keep your hands ahead. These are fallacies that everybody's teaching. And ultimately, I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to write a book so everybody willing to know can. But the advent of technology, get back to that, really is like, people are like, you're teaching what? No, that's wrong, And so, I had to just stick to my guns. Like, no, this is what I see. Studied it as best I can. Well, now you can measure it. So now you don't have to take my word for it. I can go show you John Rahm and Tom Pernice and Luke Donald and show that the center mass in a 10-yard shot never goes down. It goes up. I can show you how the weight transfers from one foot to the other, forward and back around. I can show you these things. It's like, I thought I was supposed to keep my weight on my left side. Well, that's not what the best players in the world do. It
Mm-hmm.
slightly shifts, the center of pressure moves to the right as the shoulder goes down and the swing goes back. So now it's like, to some extent, you can't really argue certain things. Now, you could certainly argue like, well, that's not what the best players in the world do. But I said, okay, well, these 20 and I start naming names, all do it. And then now you can't argue because we can measure. So that's helpful, I think, to most students, because most amateur students are so conflicted because there's so many different opinions out there. Oh, you should do it this way. You should do it this other way.
Right.
And I think that pool's starting to shrink. Now I think coaches like, no, okay, I've seen the data. I can't say that anymore. So I think that's helpful for the students. The technology is definitely helping.
There had to be, you had to get at least a little bit of a grin when all this data started coming out, that what you were teaching, even if it wasn't accepted by the mainstream and the coaching or the short game world, that once this information started to come out and validated what you had been trying to get people to understand, at least your fellow coaches and friends or colleagues, that you had to have a little bit of internal grin when this stuff started coming out and they said, "Hey, James, you've been right for a long time." Sorry.
Yeah. Everybody has an ego. I do too, unfortunately. I hopefully trying to stay humble, but it does, you know, I was dogmatic because I could hang out with Seve Ballesteros. I could take video, I could study it, and the funny thing is sometimes great players don't make great coaches because they teach feels. Like, I felt this, I was great, so this is therefore you should all feel what I feel to hit good shot. And so, like, no, this is what they do, and these are the commonalities. And so I wasn't going to back down. It is, more, I would say, widely accepted by almost all the top teachers now and top players. So there's some satisfaction there, but that's not why I went about it. I'm not trying to prove myself. I'm just trying to help people play better.
I had Dr. Rob Neal was on. God, it's hard to believe it's almost 2 years ago. And as far as I know, he was one of the first. And is it Lane Savoy that did a lot of work with the modeling and the technology to illustrate a lot of things that are happening in the short game. And then, of course, for anybody that's on social media, if you're in the coaching world, you know that the latest discussion revolving around most golf instruction has been about short game, shallow versus steep. And I find it interesting that the majority of amateurs out there don't understand that the difference between those two terms is roughly 2 seconds on a clock, just a couple degrees. But in the coaching world, it has seemed to become a polarizing thing. But I was at Open Forum a couple years ago, and they had a short game panel, and I didn't see you on there, and I don't see you commenting on a lot of these things. Is it just that it's easier for you to stay away from it, or do you happen to tend to agree with one or the other?
No, I'm not going. Well, first off, too shallow is no good. It's too shallow. Too steep is no good. It's too steep. There is a correct amount, right? So I don't want to say, how do I say this without sounding too arrogant? So I'm just like, I'm not going to argue. You know what I'm saying? I'm just not going to do it. I know what's right. I don't even know necessarily what they're saying because I don't pay attention. And I'm not interested in trying to get into it. The reality is I know where the low point is. I know what the face to path needs to be. I know what the angle of attack of the 100 so tour players I've coached. I've coached maybe like 130 or 40, and I know what it is. So why would I care what anybody else is, saying?
Makes total sense. It's like well, I don't comment on politics on Facebook anymore. It
Yeah,
got
it's like,
sucked into that years ago, and a friend of mine pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you got too many good things going on. I'd maybe stay away from it." And he was exactly right. I took that advice to heart for many years. So I understand your position. Like, why, if I'm good at it and my work illustrates it, why would I dip my toe
I'm
into
not
that?
interested in trying to be right. I have people that believe in me that want me to help them, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Mhm.
And so, it doesn't help anybody to get in an argument, I don't think, about what's too shallow, what's too steep, or how do you go about it, necessarily.
I had Rob Cheney on from Stack and Tilt a couple weeks back, and Rob and I were talking in the show and then in the pre and post show, and Stack and Tilt has gotten a lot of flack over the years. It's this, it's that. Now they have, some of their disciples have pushed back, maybe extremely on the other way. But I was telling Rob that, and I've had the good fortune to talk. I'm coming up on 200 episodes, and I've had some very world class coaches on here and different disciplines, training and fitness and all these other things. And I said, look, I think that there's a lot of overlap with what coaches are doing. I just think maybe the terminology is different, or the perception of what they're saying is different. And it doesn't do the golfing world, the public, or the coaching industry a lot of good when someone might go on one podcast and disparage another, and then that person's got to go on and do the other. So I've been working on something that I think could be very big that would have a number of coaches on at once. So we can all sit down and have a respectable discussion, even if it gets into some debate, because I'm sure there will be some differences. But I think that if people are face to face, then some of these heated discussions would be toned down. And not only the coaching business, but the golfing playing ability business in general would benefit greatly from some of these things. So I for some reason, golf just seems to go off on these tangents of these heated discussions. Now, I will preface that, and I've told a couple of people that I said golf has nothing in debates or disagreements compared to the nutrition industry. Those people go at it fierce. I mean, it makes golfers look
Yeah,
like
that's
nothing.
true. Yeah. Well,
But I
let me
was just
just make one comment about this thing, and then I think we ought to just move on to finish better topics for sure. But the directions when you're measuring something really matter. So I always say, okay, I don't want to see a high shot. I don't want to see a low shot. I want you to take your most lofted wedge, and I want you to hit a 10-yard carry shot, and I'll pace off 10 yards from a flat fairway lie.
mhm,
Now, if I said, here's your 60, hit a checker into that pin over there, or maybe I even didn't say anything. I didn't bias it, but I picked a longer target with plenty of green where they're not going to want to hit a high shot. They just would naturally see a lower flighted shot. That would skew the data versus where if I put them and I put on a little bit more of a short-sighted pin and say, okay, hit a shot to that pin. So it's like I'm always a little bit cautious about data because I'm like, I don't know what the directions were when you got the data. I don't know what kind of shots you were hitting. I don't know where the pin was. I didn't know what the wind was doing. So that all would bias the outcomes to some extent. So that's why I always, whenever I'm doing my testing, whether it's on a force plate or measuring the angle of attack or the swing the path or whatever, I'm always saying, okay, most lofted club, 10-yard carry, flat lie, don't do anything out of the ordinary, just kind of hit a stock shot. And even I'm sure even with those directions, there's bias. I'm sure
mhm.
the stock shot's different for everybody, so you got to be a little bit careful.
One thing that I struggled with when I was playing, my mind would go off, just drift, and when you're out practicing, you just start playing around because just hitting block practice gets a little bored. Um, so the one thing I always didn't ever have an answer to in my own head was, should you use let's say a 60 degree and hit low shots, hit high shots, hit stock shots, hit spinners, hit all these different things, or should you develop the structure of a stock shot with 60, 56, 52 pitching wedge and then slowly modify it from there? I did both. I had the time. I was playing full time. That was my job. I eventually developed all the way around. But for somebody out there who's, let's say, an average golfer with 8 to 18 handicap, where would you suggest that they start to develop so that their mind doesn't wander and they get some structure in their short game?
All right. So somebody at that level, and also maybe it depends on the stage of their learning. Maybe they have potential to be a scratch because they've only been playing for 2 years. I'm going to treat that differently than someone that's been playing for 25 years and is an 18 handicap. All right.
Hmm.
So most club players should just learn a really good stock shot with proper mechanics mid-flight and use at least 3 or 4 clubs to chip with. I always say if you get decent at your stock shot, you'll occasionally be handcuffed where it's a place you can't play. Maybe you're off a huge downslope, you know, and you need to super flop or something. But the reality is you can finesse your way, wedge your way well enough to be a 2 handicap. And every 18 handicap out there be, yeah, like I'd love to chip like a 2. Well, crap. Well, you don't have to do anything special to be that. Now, if you want to play for a living, you got to be able to do the other. So I always start like when I was coaching. Well, I coach Stuart Sink right now. So we go like, okay, we're going to get our 2 alignment sticks out. We're going to check your mechanics. We're going to start with our block practice. You're going to hit 3 good shots with each of these 3 clubs. All right, now we're going to start playing around. Now we'll hit the low one. Now we'll hit the super flop. Now we're going on the down slope. Now we're going to hit one out of the weeds. Now we're going to tee one up. Now so you need both if you're going to be elite. But if you're going to be a 2 handicap, you don't. You just need to be good at the stock shot. 90% of the time, you're fine just changing clubs, hitting a stock shot.
Mhm. Yeah, keep it simple, the old KISS rule.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of difficulty in the game. You don't need to make it more difficult than it needs to be at that level. Maybe that's condescending. I don't mean it that way, but the reality is, it's like, no, let's just be a 2. All right, I'm in. I'll be a 2. All right, now let's get your putting to a 2. Now let's get your ball striking to a 2. Now let's get your bunker play to a 2. Because your wedge game can be fairly easy, I would say.
How much time? Because I was when I had first found you on online, and I started following you. How much? I was very envious that you got to spend time with Seve Ballesteros. He was one of my favorites. I grew up obviously in the '80s and '90s. How cool was that to be able to spend time around him as we talk about short game? And he was, in my opinion, of course, I'm a little biased. He was my favorite player, but I always thought that he had the best short game
Yeah, I would
in the
say
world.
I wouldn't see you get much argument from anybody that's has knowledge or played that they would say Seve was the best, and he was. Not only the touch and the shot making, but the creativity and the courage and all the things that go into it. And it was the sessions were not about me. They're he was friends with my brother, so they would play and practice, and I had dinner and lunch occasionally, stuff like that. But I was, could just sit and watch, and it was really cool because he was my boyhood idol as well. I wrote in my books, like, he had the cashmere sweater and the good looks, and all the women were screaming his name. And it's like, when you're a 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, I suppose, up to maybe when last time I was able to hang out with him, I was probably uh 28 or 9. But that was like the coolest thing on the planet, because it'd be like it's like you loving uh football, and you get to hang out with Tom Brady. I
Hmm.
mean, I mean, pretty cool, right?
Was that part of the reason that you went into focusing on short game, or have such an affinity for coaching short game?
I
Did
think
that have an
so. Yeah. I
influence?
mean, I have a golf academy, so I teach full swing probably half my lessons. On the other hand, but the thing that I wake up in the morning thinking about how I'm gonna, besides just performance and what I can do to help, is like trying to dive deeper, as deep as I can, into this topic, because it's just fascinating to me. And I probably, honestly, probably started right there. When I was as a young person, seeing what's possible. A lot of people don't know what possible is until you see a guy up there, you know, hitting shots to a foot consistently from every conceivable spot. It's just, it was crazy good.
There was a Tim Morgan. I don't know if you came across Tim. Was the chief agronomist at the USGA for about 20 years. Dear friend of mine, actually lives not far down the road. Chief agronomist meaning when the USGA is going to have an event, Tim would go 5 years in advance and work with the superintendent and the grounds crew. Here's what we'd like to see. Here's how we're going to help you do it, etc. Tim told me a story when I believe it was 80. No, it couldn't have been 87. When the U.S. Open was at Olympic, not 87, but the next one, when I think Lee Janzen won. I don't remember what year that was. Early mid 2000s, I think. But Seve, Tim was on 18, and Mac O'Grady comes walking down, and he was working with Seve at the time. Seve's hitting some shots, and Tim and Mac are talking, and Seve says, "Throw some of those balls in the bunker," and he does, and he's hitting his sand wedge or his lob wedge, whatever he's hitting, and then Mac says, "Tim, watch this." He says, "Seve, let me see hit this 4-iron out of there," and Tim said they were just basically as good as his sand wedge or lob wedge shots were. He said it was absolutely mesmerizing watching Seve hit these balls out of the bunker.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I witnessed that as well. I got to see some of that. And I will say, there's another gentleman that plays Champions Tour that I coached for 30 years, Tom Pernice, that it can hit a 4-iron out of the bunker like you cannot possibly believe. I mean, just crazy. Now, the interesting thing is, because you mentioned block practice earlier, and I'm very intentful on how people train, because I have several rules in my academy. And one of them is, you got to get value from the time you invest. If you're
Mm-hmm.
going to be my student, you have to practice and train effectively. So Stuart Sink's block practice in the bunker is basically to take a 7-iron. And I also did this with James Driscoll back in the day when I coached him when he was playing. It's like, okay, your first 10 shots are going to be with the 7-iron. And what you have to do is, you got to get them over the lip and keep them short of that pin out there, some arbitrary pin. And when you start that way, and it's like, just nature versus nurture. You have no choice but to release the club properly. And so that's always a good place to start. And I kind of, I've picked that up basically from watching Seve Ballesteros as a, 19-year-old or at Winged Foot or in the U.S. Open practicing with my brother. That's the type of stuff he would do.
That's very cool. I've seen some people hit 4-irons. Bunker is probably the weakest part of my game. I would say at the level I was trying to get, I didn't get my tour card. I came close a couple of times, but I would always said that was the weakest part of my game. But I also hit a lot of greens. I think I averaged 13 to 14 greens around, and I very rarely hit in the bunker. When I did, there wasn't nearly as much confidence hitting that shot as there was hitting it from 205 yards away. And honestly, I think I was watching one of your videos not long ago with Smiley Kaufman, and the simplest thing, how it can click in a golfer's game, when you said that the club head the splash needs to be going left of the target line. And watched that, and it's like everything just clicked in my own head, and I go, oh my God, I've been doing it wrong the whole time. Just my intent and perception of where the club had to go was completely off, and it made me an average at best bunker player.
Yeah, and I mean, it needs to be thrown left, and a lot of people screw it up by aiming left and then still dropping it under and still fighting like chunk thin, and they see the splash mark a little to the left. Now, the reality is if you line up reasonably square and deliver it so it's thrown to the left and to get that left splash mark, that's when the secret sauce happens. And Smiley would be actually a great person to copy because he was a phenomenal bunker player and hit that thing straight up in the air with as much spin as anybody I've ever worked with.
You
Really
know,
talented kids. Yeah.
you had mentioned, Tom, here in Hilton Head, we had our Hilton Head PGA chapter teaching summit. Jason Sutton does a great job in putting that on. And Krista Dunton was doing a bit on sand game, and she had Tom hitting these shots out of the bunker with this really wide stance and the shaft basically vertical, almost the ball position almost at the middle. And he's just hitting these things. It's like one after another. And it's like, that's, to me, again, someone who was average at best out of the bunker, I'm watching this just like, boy, it'd be so nice to be able to do something like that.
He's special, talented, short game guy.
You talk a lot about geometry, physics, and psychology of short game. Can you unpack those a little bit, give people a better understanding of where you're coming from with those?
Well, big topics, all of them. And I mean, if we're going to talk about the psychology, it's such a big topic. I did write a book on it. It's called Cool Under Pressure. I wrote it with a gentleman from Philadelphia by the name of Randall Stutman, Dr. Stutman. And it could use a rewrite because I'm learning new stuff every day, and the reality is confidence to some extent comes from preparation. Your belief system, every time you hit a shot, there's an opportunity to grow your self-belief, your belief in yourself, or ruin yourself. Just tell yourself you suck. And then all of a sudden you do that enough, you have scar tissue. So, and we all have it. If you've played long enough, you have it. But I'm a big fan of making your Tuesday practice competing, winning your way out of the bunker, win your way off the green, win your way off the chipping green, win your way off the driving range tee, because ultimately winning golf is usually, for a good player, it's just an ordinary performance on a special day. It's just like Tuesday, I shot 4 under. What do I have to do on Saturday? Well, I just need to do what I always do. But the problem is we don't play that way. We don't practice that way on Tuesday because we're not really competing. So it seems too easy. It's a meaningless, there's nothing on the line. And then all of a sudden Saturday seems too big or too important and people underperform that way. So I think training properly kind of goes hand in hand with the mental. I think they can boost each other. And then a lot of it's just the mental discipline. One of the things I'm a big fan of after a session or after a drill or after a tournament would be reflecting. You just give me 5 minutes of reflection and think about what you did well, what you learned. In other words, I messed up in the bunker these 3 times, and all right, now what am I going to do about it? So it also then reflecting can direct your practice for the next day, so it becomes more valuable. The training aspect and the mental discipline you go about not only pre-shot but post-shot has a lot to do with the psychology of being a high performer. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. You hear so much about the pre-shot. You don't hear very seldom. In fact, I mean, I'd like to think I'm 53. I've been around golf for quite some time. I have not really ever heard anybody talk about the post shot outside of
The
don't beat
post shot,
yourself up.
yeah, the post shot's way more important, honestly. And I spend as a coach way more time that because now think about this: you're my student. You come in and you're going to compete. You're playing tournaments and you want to be good. Let's say you're a college player and you're wanting to someday be a pro. How long am I with you? Well, I might be with you for a half a day, and then I'm not going to see you for 8 weeks, right? You're going to be out there on your own. If you can't coach yourself, you're screwed because
Mm.
golf is hard and you're going to have to adapt and not every day is going to be great. So one of the main thing I coach when someone comes to me is I try and get them to be a positive self-coach, coach themselves well. The ball's talking to you on every shot. You just got to know what it's saying, right? And you got to understand your misses. So when the ball goes over that way, I'm not in search mode. I'm doubling down on a foundational piece. And if you're not a good reflector, if you can't give me even after a shot, give me 3 seconds, understand what the ball just said to you, file the correction away, and move on, then you're those 6, 7 weeks when you're away from me, you're going to have quite a few low points. With some points you do it enough, you get the scar tissue, and now you underperform way. Uh, you perform so much less than what you're capable of, right? And a lot of times we kind of work our way into that.
Yeah, it's like if you get down on yourself, I always used to tell amateurs when I would play because they're if they play in a pro am or they're playing with you and they know you're playing for a living, you're a good player, and they're a 6 or I'm filling the blank handicap, and they're trying to play their best because they're with someone that's a professional. I'm just not saying with me if they play with you or they play with their head pro or assistant, whoever it is. But they get down on themselves so much, and I would always tell them, I said, "Look, you wouldn't yell at me if I hit a bad shot, if we're in a team event, the way you're yelling at yourself. So, or your wife or your spouse or maybe your kids, but why would you do it to yourself?" And they just, see the face expression change.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you the premise of I've written 3 books. The last one, Cool Under Pressure. Here's the premise. All right. You just said it. If you have any social aspect from like an ego standpoint, a reputation standpoint, when you play golf, you are completely screwed. If we're playing and you're trying to impress me, you're screwed because now your reputation's on the line with every shot. That's just impossible to live up to and impossible to focus on the target without being distracted and focus on what you got to do to execute. If you're worried about me, if I'm thinking about my place in the tournament, my reputation, who's thinking about me, what do they think about me? Every shot is potentially embarrassing, impossible to
Hmm.
play good golf. There can be none of that. And the reality is this: you got to understand why you play golf. Now, if you want to talk about the psychology, here's a huge point. Why, Pete, when you're a kid, why did you love golf? Why did you decide to start to play? And if you start to unpack all that, remember we talked about most problems are people problems, are emotional problems. It's like, well, I want to spend time with my dad. He worked a lot and there was something we could do together on the weekends. And so I like being outside. And I'm like, oh, and you're honest and you're a hard worker and you like a challenge and you like all these things. I don't like people telling me what to do. I don't want a coach to set me on the bench. And so there's all these reasons that we all at some point get pulled to like, ooh, golf's my thing. I like it. All right. If that means you're playing for yourself, right?
Hmm.
I'm not, I'm doing this for me because I enjoy it, because it's a challenge, all these things. And all of a sudden now I'm playing for you because I'm worried about what you think of me. I mean, I'm completely screwed. You see what I'm saying? So let's say, for example, you're playing for your reputation, right? And I'm playing because I love a challenge. All right. We both tee off at the first hole of the tournament. You make triple. I do too. You're devastated because now your reputation as a good golfer has
Hmm.
took a huge hit. And I could be like Tiger did at the Open Championship when he made triple on the first hole and just go, you know what? Let's see if I get it back to even by the turn. I'm going to look at it like a challenge to overcome. It's like you're devastated because your reputation took a hit, and I'm looking at it like a challenge. So the same experience happened, yet the mindset and how we respond are completely different. right? One's super negative. The other is like, okay, I'm determination. No, I'm going to go. Let's go. So it's
Very,
like, yeah, there cannot be any social aspect. Now, it doesn't mean like, when I'm not saying social, I'm not saying you and I are going to go play and we're going to have a great time together. That's not what I'm talking about social. I'm talking more like from an ego standpoint. You know what I'm saying?
once somebody gets put in the competition, they seem to have a default to their uh, negative pull of whatever they're working with, and that seems to be shown upon whether it's a city championship, junior event, NCAA championship, tour event, whatever someone wants to put in there. Yes, that weakness seems to come out, and it's like something you always have to work on. It just
You
never.
always got to remind yourself why
Yes.
you're playing. Why am I here? Why am I, it's because I like a challenge. I like being outside, and it's true. It's not like you're fooling yourself and you can't. But the reality is it's about choosing what you make important. What's important here? How I attack this shot with courage or where it goes and what it all means. If it happens to go over the green and I make a double, what does it all mean? Well, I'm worried about that. I got no chance to do the other.
But one thing I want to touch on, because somebody walks into a golf shop, pro shop, a wedge fitting, offsite shop, there are so many selections of wedges nowadays, different bounces, different grinds, different lofts. And I know that you've done a lot of work on this and are able to dial in what somebody should or should not have. I know we don't have all day to talk about it, and we could probably make a multi-hour session on just this, but
We
can you give
absolutely
people an
could.
introduction on this?
I have very strong opinions here, very strong, but
It's one reason
I'm
I
going to
asked you.
base it off this. Yeah, I'm going to base it off this. So here's a two sided of the coin. If you're a club fitter, okay, am I going to give you the club that's going to kind of mask your problems and help you play better today? All right, so you're too steep, you have horrible technique, the face is close to the path, and you dig a trench. So I'm going to give you a lob wedge with a huge bottom on it and the most amount of bounce I could possibly give you, which in the Titleist line would be a D grind lob wedge. All right, here you go. I just helped you as a club fitter. Well, you just ruined it for me because I can't teach you how to hit a proper shot out of a tight lie with that club. You know what I'm saying? So this is what my preference would be. You should have gapping in your wedges of no more than 20 yards. All right. So if your pitching wedge goes 130, you got to have a club that goes further than 110. Okay. So we get nothing more than 20 yards. Bounce is your friend. So you're going to have to get the most bounce you can get in your gap wedge and a high bounce sand wedge as well. So the most popular grind on the Titleist line and the sand wedge on tour is F grind. It's basically like a 56-14 or 54-14, right? It's got, all right, now in your most lofted club, you need, I think, a thinner sole, definitely a low bounce option. So that's not always the sole width because they have a K star, which is a low bounce option, even though it's a wide sole. Now, if you have a high bounce sand wedge and a low bounce lob wedge, and you got the right gapping, this is what the benefit of that would be. If you're in super soft sand, Pete, does the ball come out slow or does it come out fast?
Slower.
Slower. So less loft would help you. So if you had a 56 or a 60, you'd be more smarter to choose the 56, right? It helps the ball go further. All right.
Yeah, sand's going to absorb
In
the energy.
soft sand, do you want more bounce or less bounce?
Soft
Soft
sand, you
sand,
want more.
more bounce. So if I had a high bounce sand wedge, I have less loft and more bounce in soft conditions. Sandy turf, grainy turf, dormant Bermuda grass, soft sand. I have a play, and it would be a sand wedge with a lot of bounce on, a little open face, and I got the most protection against digging that I could possibly get. All right, now the opposite is true in firm sand. The sand is like this, like this table.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to get that high bounce lob wedge under the ball? You're not. And none of that, but it comes out fast.
Yes.
So I have more loft and less bounce. I can play in tight, firm conditions. So if I have that set makeup, not only can I teach you good technique to hit any flop shot off a tight lie, but I can play in any group agronomy condition, any soft sand, soft grass, firm. I can go over, brick hard and put it back and have no bounce. But if you only have high bounce stuff or you only have low bounce stuff, I can find a situation where you're going to really struggle. I don't care how good you are. I can find one. It's like I was being kind of a dick to a couple junior players that wanted to take a lesson from me, and they go, "Hey, I was in San Diego at the Bridges, the Rancho Santa Fe. A buddy of mine, the pro, goes, 'Hey, would you help these two junior players? They're the best in the club, yada yada.' I said, 'Sure.' I said, 'Go, kids, they're like 14. Bring all your chipping clubs down to the chipping green, and we'll meet you there in 5 minutes or whatever.' So they come down with one club. You want to take a guess? 60,
Lob wedge,
right?
yeah.
Lob wedge. I said, 'Kids, no, go back and get your other chipping clubs.' So they go, 'Got it, coach.' I go, 'Okay, come on over and hit. I want to see how hit this shot for me.' So the back of the green, there's an upslope about 30 degrees, and it's dead into the grain, and it's Bermuda. All right. And I picked a pin. There's like 30 yards away. So they're upslope into the grain Bermuda with their lob wedge, and they both chili dipped it like about, the first kid hit like 6 inches. I mean, literally like roll over the club, and the kid's laughing at him. Another kid hit it like a foot. I mean, same deal, not on the green. He's like, I said, 'Okay, now go get your 9-iron, and I'm going to show you how off an upslope you want to shallow the delivery and have a little more effective bounce, or what. And so the reality is you need options, because adapting to certain environments and lies correctly demanded. I can handcuff you if you want me to. It's just, all right, no, I only have so that's why you have to have a high bounce middle wedge and a low bounce lofted wedge.
Yeah, and that brings up two questions. Is the first one is when for most people out there, not some of the very, very high level coaches and players will understand and they'll know the answer to this, but how do you differentiate between thin sole and high bounce or thick sole and low bounce? And how would they do that? And then the second would be various parts of the country, obviously, as you brought up Bermuda grass, various parts of the country have different types of grasses. Would you recommend that people have, if they're going to travel and play golf, they're going to go to Florida, they're going to go to around your area in the Midwest, they're going to go to the Pacific Northwest, Northeast, Southwest, should they have different wedges for different types of grass?
Yes, they should if they're going to be elite. So the tour players I coach typically will travel with 2 lob wedge, a super low bounce option when it gets really tight and firm bunkers, because you're going to spin the ball way more with that club than you will. And then typically if they go kind of wet, grainy Florida, maybe it's early March, late February, they would have a club that they don't use very often. That's it wouldn't be a high bounce, but it'd be at least a mid bounce lob wedge. And did that with Ben Crane back in the day. We did it with Stuart Sink, still does it. And it's just the right play. And so you should probably have, now, is a club player going to do that? No, just the set that I just gave you. It's just like, okay, you're in that situation. You're just not going to use your lob wedge chipping today. Everything's going to be sand wedge. Okay. And when can I use my lob wedge, coach? Okay. When you're hitting a 65-yard shot or when you're hitting a bunker shot, but the reality is that some environments are just conducive to having a certain type of wedge. So if you had the set makeup I suggest, you just got to be disciplined not to pull out your lob wedge in that situation. And I will say this, Ved talked about this quite a bit. When I was a kid, there was no such thing as chipping yips, right? There was no ADHD. There's no, all right. So why? You think about this. When I was a kid, I had 2 wedges. I had a pitching wedge and a sand wedge, right?
Yep.
What did I use the sand wedge for? Hitting bunker shots. What did I chip with? A pitching wedge. Now, I also grew up on these little turtleback greens. They were raised up and everything was down here, and I only had a pitching wedge. And so, of course, I had the face open. Of course, I released the club. And I just did it naturally. And the same thing that happened if you look like at Bobby Jones. I have video of Bobby Jones chipping. Well, why would he be so wristy? Why would he do this. Well, he had his most lofted club they called a lofter. It was basically a gap wedge. And so when you give certain, like if I made you hit a soft shot with your 9-iron, you would have better technique. Well, what happens? 1980, Tom Kite gets a 60-degree wedge. Now all of a sudden everybody's starting to get a 60-degree wedge. Now that people use this, what's a 60-degree wedge do with good mechanics? To me, it goes up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not every shot you want. So they pull out this club that is meant to do this, and they're trying to do this other thing with it, hit it low. And then you combine that with tighter lies,
Yes.
and now people cannot chip at all. I mean, it's a pandemic of bad chipping out there. But I didn't see that when I was a kid. I don't know if you did.
No,
I mean,
not,
we're
and you're
similar
exactly
age,
right.
right?
I mean,
And it's
I grew
because
up.
people didn't use lob wedge everywhere.
No, and I remember getting my first 60-degree, and I popped the thing straight up in the air because I was so used to
Yeah.
having to do something with my 56 to get it airborne. Because as you said, you didn't have any other option, and I grew up.
And by the way, Seve Ballesteros never had anything but a 56, and he could
Yeah,
hit it straight up in the air, right? So it's doable. You don't always have to use your 60, okay? So you get the wrong environment, just keep it in your bag for a while.
The par 3 I started playing on is a 9-hole par 3 course, and all the greens, as you just said, were domed. It was like chipping on a upside down saucer, and they were probably 15, 18 feet in diameter. So you're hitting shots of these, and you're not hitting many greens because they're so small. But then you're chipping, and depending on where the hole was, I mean, it honed your short game so good that you had no choice. Now, when you're a young teenager, and you go to the big course, your long game's terrible, and you just know, well, knock it around until you can get it close to the green, then I can get it up and down because my short game is good. But yes, I align
There's
with that
definitely some
assessment.
nature versus nurture here. Once again, if I make you chip with your lob wedge and put you in the wrong environment, you're going to have trouble.
What
So,
biggest short
me.
game killers that you see with good players? Because you work with so many. What are the things that you see that really, really hurt them that they're doing, that they come to you and say, it's
All right.
glaring, it
So
stands
there's
out?
number one thing you take to the bank. Down is dead. If you're going down, if the center of your mass at any point during the motion is going down, you're going to chunk and skull, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Very few good shots. So the energy flows forward, up, and around. All right. So good players extend as they rotate. There's freedom in that. That's the way we got tissue and connective tissue and muscles, and you're trying to stay down or you're going down, you're in trouble. So that's probably the thing that you can spot it from the parking lot. You see somebody go down from the parking lot, they're struggling. Okay. A lot of times I'll tell you something, there's two things that kind of go together and a lot of people just don't understand. And I always talked about how Pernice and Seve had the face open to the pat, this, that, and the other. Not a deal breaker, but I think it's super helpful. Well, I was giving a lecture at the Taos Performance Institute. There's like 30, 40 golf pros in there, and I'm doing my presentation. I look in the back, and I see this old guy back there, fit the class, so to speak. And I'm looking back there, I'm thinking, holy cow, that's Phil Rogers. Now, Phil Rogers was a legendary tour player, maybe the best short
Yes.
game coach ever, right? So I just basically stopped my presentation at a logical spot, and I said, hey, we got Phil Rogers in the back of the room. He should come up and I said, Phil, critique what I just laid out. If you don't like it, I'm a big boy. Let me have it. He goes, well, I loved what you said. You talked about the face being open, but you didn't say anything about the number one mistake amateurs make. And I don't have a club handy, so I'm going to have to just kind of do it this way. Okay. So imagine that I was holding the club straight out to you, and this is the face, and this is the shaft, right? So that would be square. And if I turn the face this way, that would be closed. And if I turn the face that way, it'd be open, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I sit the club down and that's square, if I lean the handle but hood the club face, like I keep the face pointing at the pin, but I have the shaft forward.
Right.
Well, the face is closed. So if I push the handle forward, the face should just go right along with it. So he says people lean the handle forward because that helps create spin and lower contact lower in the face and a lot of good things, but they hood the face. Now, if you had a hooded club face and you wanted to hit it straight, typically, where would the backswing be? Where would the path be? Closed club face, I want to hit it straight.
Jeez, got to be too much in and out if they're trying to.
Yeah. So I got a closed club face. So intuitively, I take it inside, which is going
Mhm.
to be too shallow unless
Yes.
I drive my legs and dip and pull the handle, which are all, I think, horrendous things to do in a short game. So, but the root cause effect of the domino effect was in the setup. They leaned the handle forward and didn't allow the face to rotate right along with it. And if I showed you videos of people that I would say are elite, like I pull up Russell Henley, here's a video, and they'd say, okay, that face, because it's lining up at the shaft is square and it looks pretty open, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's like that. I mean, they set the club face a crazy amount open at address with forward shaft lean. And that's not what amateur players like to see. You know, that is a deal breaker. They hood the face, they take it in, then they dive, dip, or drag to try and get the low point in the right place. So if you're talking from a technique perspective, that's like down. It's typically from a closed club face going in. Now, there are a couple amazing elite tour players that have the face a little closed, but it's up above. So Scotty Scheffler would be an example of that. Jim Furyk, Jose Maria Olazabal were always like this way, but they would keep it outside their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the through swing, they would do the other way. They would supinate. So it's not a deal breaker, but typically I much rather see it like Steve Stricker or Luke Donald or Tom Panisse, where they swing the club back and the face rotates open and they set it open so that they can release the club with some speed and some confidence and create spin and all the good things that happen when you do that.
Do you see that pattern? One or the other tends to follow their full swing more so than having something opposite for short game?
I would say the best players understand. Let me say this: the pattern, your full swing pattern, absolutely bleeds into your short game pattern, and it's a problem because they're opposite in most regards. Almost everything that you want from 10 yards, you want opposite at 300 or 250 or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And it's very difficult to have two different patterns. But I think that's where the elite performance is, understanding what's optimal at both and being optimal at both. Some people think that's too hard, and they'll always just kind of handcuff themselves one way or the other. They'll be elite ball strikers, but just okay around the greens. I would put like Jack Nicklaus in that category, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I look at Tiger. He had amazing full swing mechanics, and then the chipping was elite. And I'd say it was a different pattern. He used a different grip. He used like a 10-finger grip chipping, where he had, and so I think he had the understanding he needed to be elite at both, and they were different. And I'll tell you a quick story about that. But like 2010, Charlie Hoffman hired me to help him with the bunker and chipping. Well, he was a flusher, with a 5-iron and a driver, he hit this closed face little cut and he could repeat. And I showed him out in the bunker how the club needed to be like this. And in the chipping, it would be better if he was like that. And his bunker and his chipping got better, but guess what got worse?
His ball striking. Yeah.
His ball striking. And you do not want to make that trade. That was a tough lesson. He had amazing people on his team to help him get through that, back to being a flusher again. Yeah, I mean, you got to be somewhat careful. Now, I have a little cue that I use for my own game, and sometimes I try and get people to understand. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to use this kinematic sequence, and I'm going to have the face open the path. I'm going to take my glove off. And when I put my glove on, I'm going to have the face turned down so I can really shift and rotate and compress the ball. And have a different kinematic sequence, right? One built for power versus one built for control and being soft. And the key is taking my glove off and on. So, but I don't care how you do it. You don't have, but as long as you keep it straight in your brain. Yeah.
On Charlie's situation, was it just massaging the different feels and then associating one for short game and one for full swing to where he had to, in
Well,
his
I
own
think
brain, he had
so.
to
The
get those?
reality is he he, like most people, he's just a really hard worker. So he worked so hard on this movement and getting that club open that he didn't realize, but it started to bleed into like his full swing takeaway. He didn't realize that he was making a slight change, but he just worked so hard on the other. So you just got to, I'm just saying, understanding what's optimal in both.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first rule of my golf academy, the second one was you got to get value from your practice time. The first one is you got to define what's foundational. So what's foundational chipping? What's foundational in the bunker? What's foundational in your full swing? All right, now we're going to have simple ways to check them every day. And the quicker we get it done, the better. If it takes 2 minutes, it'll be better than if it took 3. But we're always going to check those simple foundational things. So it might just be grip, posture, stance, takeaway, a feeling of this thing at the top, and then maybe one drill to get the impact conditions right or something. Everybody's a little different, but the reality is, yeah, it's hard to keep chaos at bay. And here's one thing I will tell you, Pete, you're going to play golf. At some point, there's going to be chaos. You think you're hitting every fairway and every green and every putts. No, and you're not going to 3-putt. No, at some point your ball's going to be in a bush 1.5 feet up in the air with, it's just chaos is coming. So you got to be good at that. And guess what? Chaos can come to when it comes to mechanics. So we're going to keep it at bay by being organized and have everything defined. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it's like you hate to hear it when you're a kid, but you make these mistakes and you get older and you start to understand things. Eating your vegetables is one of them. So the more you can eat your vegetables and eat healthy, you're going to be healthier. You're not going to get sick as often. But if you do get sick, you're going to get your health back a lot faster. That would be my analogy for what you're trying to explain for your golf game.
Yeah. I mean, if it's defined, you're not going to, when you get off, it's going to get back on quicker. You're going to know where to go. You're going to recommit to certain things that will never be wrong, that sort of thing.
Where do you see short game instruction and short game in general going in the next 5 to 10 years based off how accelerated it's come in the last, let's say 10 years? Where do you see it in the next 5 to 10?
Well, it probably will adapt if there's, if equipment changes. For example, like when they did away with square grooves, that changed a lot of things. Like people that used to have the face turned down and could stop it with spin, couldn't do it anymore. So then I got a lot of clients. A lot of people say, I can't stop, I can't chip anymore, right? So it may adapt if equipment changes, and who knows what's going to happen with the ball. That's where my brain is going.
Yes,
I don't know
that's a big one.
If they change the ball, how's that going to affect my job? I have no idea, because
you'll probably get a lot busier.
Will be consequences for sure, which is why I'm against it. I think it's dumb to roll back the ball. Personally, I think golf's in the best spot it's ever been. But I would also say that I think people become more in line because more people will be measuring what the best players in the world do. And the funny thing about that is you got to be careful because everybody has a unique fingerprint and kind of everybody's doing it a little bit different, right? If you go to the club down the street and you see John Rahm and David Hughes practicing together, they're both unbelievable short games, unbelievable, but they don't do it the same. But if you dive deep enough, there are commonalities. And I think with technology, those commonalities will be, more people will view that and see that as, okay, these are foundational things. So there's room for style. I can set up this way, I can deliver this way, but ultimately these things blend together. And I think technology is going to make that more common and more easily digestible for the average person. And probably won't be less disagreement, Pete, unfortunately. But
busy disagreement. We'll have tell everyone where they can follow you if you're talking or we got another book coming out soon. Tell us where we can find that.
Well, I'll
and
tell
of course,
you,
we'll have it in the
I've written 3
summary, all the
books.
links.
Yeah. Well, I have a golf academy in Omaha, Nebraska. It's open seasonally, so April through October.
You're slowing down now. That part of the country.
But if you really want me to guide you or help you, I've created a place where we can do this using technology. And it's called shortgamemastery.com. And it's a series of videos from A to Z. So, Pete, you're struggling in the bunker. You can go to the bunker portal, and there might be 16 videos that are like 2 minutes long that say, okay, these are the keys to your setup. This is the key to your backswing and the delivery. This is what you do when you have soft sand or firm sand. This is what you do on upslopes and downslopes. Everybody's like all the way through. All right. And then I hold weekly Facebook Live sessions where you can submit a video to me and ask me questions. So you get in there and you're trying to work through these videos, and for some reason, you can't hit it off a downslope. You know, you've tried what I've suggested, it's not working. You say, hey, James, here's these videos from my last session off the downslope. I'm hitting too far behind the ball. Can you tell me what's going on? Right. And then I can get in there and, you know, through Zoom, we do it in a big group. And I have members in Spain and, you know, Sweden and everywhere. It's cool because we can all, it's like a community where we talk,
Very neat. Very cool.
nerd out on technique and training and golf stuff, you know. So
And is that a private Facebook? Is that the Facebook page? Is that a private page?
It's a private page. And so when you join, you get when you join Short Game Master, you get access to the videos, but then you get a link to join the Facebook group.
Very cool.
So it's an opportunity there for, let's say you got some guy in Seattle. I'm not coming to Omaha to take lessons from you, right? That's maybe, but he can at his home and go through it at his own schedule, go through everything I believe in, and then still interact with me like you and I are, just in the same manner, right? And he can ask questions, or I can look at his swing and make suggestions. So it's really been a cool project. I've been doing that now for like 2-3 years.
It's got to keep you interested and keep it fun. And as long as you've been doing it, you reach certain levels. It's like, what keeps you motivated? And if these small things with technology can keep you motivated, it just keeps you in the game longer and gets a lot more people better.
Yeah, that's right.
What we'll have, as we always do, one-click links to all your social media, your website, links to your books. We'll link that on your website as well. So anybody, we highly recommend getting James' books. Get on his Short Game Mastery, only if you want to get your short game really good and take all your friends' money, no matter what level you are. But James, it's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed talking to you. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. I appreciate the insightful questions, and hopefully I made sense today.
Yes, one of these we'll have to do another one with stories of James Sieckmann from your travels, and
I've got a lot of
we'll make it all stories. Yes, that'd be a lot of fun. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll check you out next time.